In the heart of the Roman Republic, during a time of conquest, cultural upheaval, and political intrigue, one man stood as a symbol of unwavering principle, discipline, and moral rigor. His name was Marcus Porcius Cato, known to history as Cato the Elder. Born in 234 BC into a modest family of farmers, Cato's early life was far from the opulent halls of Rome's elite. Yet, through sheer determination, unshakable values, and an unyielding commitment to the ideals of the Roman Republic, he rose to become one of the most influential statesmen of his time. Cato was a man of contradictions, a farmer who became a senator, a soldier who became a philosopher, and a traditionalist who helped shape the future of Rome. He was a fierce defender of Roman tradition, a relentless opponent of corruption, and a voice of moral clarity in an age of growing excess and ambition. His famous phrase, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed, echoes through history as a testament to his uncompromising nature. But Cato's legacy is far more complex than a single slogan. He was a man who believed that Rome's strength lay not in its armies or its wealth, but in its virtues, discipline, frugality, and an unbreakable sense of duty. Today we'll explore the life of Cato the Elder, from his humble beginnings in the countryside to his rise as a political giant, and finally to his enduring legacy. Through his story, we'll discover how one man's ideals helped shape the destiny of Rome and left an indelible mark on history. Cato the Elder was born in 234 BC in the small town of Tusculum, nestled in the rolling hills just southeast of Rome. Unlike many of Rome's elite, Cato did not come from a wealthy or aristocratic family. His ancestors were farmers, simple, hard-working people who tilled the land and lived by the values of frugality, discipline, and self-reliance. Cato's early years were spent in the countryside, where he learned to plow fields, tend to livestock, and live a life rooted in the rhythms of nature. These rural roots would profoundly shape his character and his later political philosophy. For Cato, the farmer's life was not just a means of survival, it was a school of virtue, teaching him the importance of hard work, honesty, and independence. These were the values he would carry with him throughout his life, even as he rose to the highest levels of Roman power. But Cato's childhood was not just shaped by the tranquility of rural life. It was also marked by the turbulence of one of the most dramatic periods in Roman history, the Second Punic War. This was a time when Rome faced its greatest existential threat. The Carthaginian general Hannibal, one of history's most brilliant military commanders, had crossed the Alps with his army, including war elephants, and brought the war to Rome's doorstep. For over a decade, Hannibal wreaked havoc across Italy, defeating Roman armies in battle after battle. The most devastating of these was the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, where Hannibal annihilated a Roman force of over 50,000 men. It was a time of fear, uncertainty, and sacrifice for the Roman people. Cato grew up in this atmosphere of crisis, and it left an indelible mark on him. He saw firsthand the cost of war, the importance of discipline, and the need for unwavering loyalty to the Republic. These experiences would later fuel his fierce patriotism and his belief in the superiority of Roman values. Cato's family, like many Romans, felt the impact of the war deeply. The constant threat of invasion, the loss of lives, and the economic strain of prolonged conflict were part of daily life. Yet, it was also a time when Roman society came together, united by a shared sense of duty and sacrifice. Cato absorbed these lessons early on. He learned that the strength of Rome lay not in its wealth or its armies, but in the character of its people. This belief would become the cornerstone of his political philosophy. Even as a young man, Cato was known for his stern demeanor and his commitment to traditional Roman values. He was not one for frivolity or luxury. Instead, he embraced a life of simplicity and discipline. These traits set him apart from many of his contemporaries, and would later define his career in public service. By the time Cato reached adulthood, the Second Punic War was nearing its end, but its lessons would stay with him forever. He had seen how Rome, despite being brought to the brink of destruction, had persevered through sheer willpower, unity, and an unshakable belief in its destiny. These were the values Cato would champion throughout his life. His rural upbringing, combined with the trials of war, forged him into a man of unyielding principle and determination. Little did he know that these early experiences would prepare him for a journey that would take him from the fields of Tusculum to the halls of the Roman Senate, where he would become one of the most influential figures in Roman history. Cato's first taste of public life came through military service, a path that was almost inevitable for a young Roman of his time. The Second Punic War was still raging, and Rome needed every able-bodied man to defend the Republic. Cato enlisted as a soldier and soon found himself serving under one of Rome's greatest generals, Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as ex Scipio Africanus. Scipio was a brilliant strategist, and under his command, Cato learned the art of war, not just how to fight, but how to lead. He witnessed firsthand the importance of discipline, loyalty, and strategic thinking. These lessons would stay with him for the rest of his life. Cato's bravery on the battlefield earned him the respect of his fellow soldiers and his commanders. He was not just a fighter, he was a thinker, someone who understood that Rome's strength lay in its ability to adapt and persevere. By the time the war ended in 201 BC, Cato had proven himself as both a soldier and a leader, qualities that would serve him well in his next chapter, politics. After the war, Cato returned to Rome, but his life as a farmer was behind him. He had seen too much, learned too much, to remain on the sidelines. In 204 BC, he entered politics, starting as a quaestor, a financial administrator responsible for managing Rome's treasury. It was a role that required not just intelligence, but integrity, and Cato excelled. He quickly gained a reputation for honesty and efficiency, qualities that were in short supply among Rome's elite. Cato was not afraid to challenge the status quo. He uncovered corruption, streamlined processes, and ensured that public funds were used for the benefit of the Republic, not the enrichment of a few. His success as quaestor earned him the trust of the Roman people and set the stage for his next step, the office of aedile. In 199 BC, Cato was elected aedile, a position that allowed him to oversee public works and organize games for the people. It was a role that required both practicality and showmanship, and Cato approached it with his characteristic discipline. He ensured that public funds were spent wisely, improving Rome's infrastructure and providing entertainment that uplifted rather than corrupted the citizens. But Cato's time as aedile was also marked by his growing opposition to the influence of Greek culture, which he saw as a threat to Roman values. He believed that the luxury and decadence associated with Greek art, philosophy, and lifestyle were undermining the traditional virtues that had made Rome great. This stance would become a defining feature of his political career. Cato's rise reached its peak in 195 BC, when he was elected consul, the highest office in the Roman Republic. As consul, Cato had the power to shape Rome's policies and defend its values on the world stage. He used this position to champion the causes he believed in, opposing luxury, fighting corruption, and preserving Roman traditions. One of his most significant acts as consul was his campaign against the spread of Greek culture. He saw it as a corrupting influence, one that encouraged indulgence and weakened the moral fiber of the Republic. Cato's conservative policies made him a polarizing figure. Some admired his integrity and commitment to tradition. Others saw him as rigid and out of touch, but no one could deny his impact. Cato's consulship marked his arrival as a major political force, a man who would shape the course of Roman history for decades to come. Cato's early political career was a testament to his unwavering principles and his belief in the power of virtue. From the battlefields of the Second Punic War to the halls of the Roman Senate, he had proven himself as a leader, a reformer, and a defender of the Republic. But this was only the beginning. Cato's greatest challenges and his most enduring legacy were still to come. In 184 BC, Cato reached the pinnacle of his political career when he was elected censor, one of the most prestigious and powerful positions in the Roman Republic. The censors were responsible for overseeing the moral conduct of Roman citizens, managing the census, and safeguarding the traditions that defined Roman society. For Cato, this was not just a political office, it was a mission. He saw himself as the guardian of Rome's soul, a defender of the virtues that had made the Republic great. And so, he launched a relentless campaign against what he perceived as the moral decay creeping into Roman life. His tenure as censor would become legendary, not just for its impact, but for the fierce determination with which Cato pursued his goals. Cato's first target was the growing culture of luxury and extravagance among Rome's elite. He believed that the pursuit of wealth and pleasure was eroding the traditional values of discipline, frugality, and duty. To combat this, he imposed heavy taxes on luxury goods, everything from expensive clothing to elaborate jewelry. He even targeted private villas that he deemed too opulent, forcing their owners to pay fines or face public shame. Cato's message was clear: Rome's strength lay in its simplicity, not its wealth. But his reforms didn't stop there. He also took aim at the Senate itself, expelling members he considered corrupt or morally unfit. These actions made him many enemies, but they also earned him the admiration of those who shared his vision for a virtuous Rome. One of Cato's most controversial actions as censor was his campaign against Greek culture. To many Romans, Greek art, philosophy, and literature were symbols of sophistication and progress, but to Cato, they were a threat. He believed that Greek ideas encouraged indulgence, skepticism, and a disregard for tradition. In a bold move, he banned Greek philosophers from Rome and restricted the teaching of Greek philosophy in the city. This decision shocked many, but for Cato, it was a necessary step to protect Roman values. He saw himself as a bulwark against the tide of foreign influence, a defender of the Roman way of life. Yet, Cato's legacy as censor was not just about what he opposed, it was also about what he championed. His most enduring contribution during this time was his literary work, De Agricultura, On Agriculture. This book was more than just a practical guide to farming. It was a manifesto of Cato's philosophy. In it, he praised the virtues of hard work, self-sufficiency, and simplicity. He believed that agriculture was the foundation of a strong and virtuous society, and he urged Romans to return to their roots. De Agricultura was filled with practical advice, from how to manage a farm to how to treat slaves. But it was also a call to action. Cato wanted his readers to see farming not just as a way of life, but as a moral duty. Cato's tenure as censor was marked by both triumph and controversy. His reforms were bold, his methods uncompromising, and his impact undeniable. He had taken on the most powerful forces in Roman society: the wealthy elite, the corrupt senators, and the growing influence of foreign cultures. And he had done so with unwavering conviction. But his actions also made him a polarizing figure. To some, he was a hero, a man who stood up for the values that made Rome great. To others, he was a relic of the past, out of touch with the changing world. Regardless of how he was viewed, one thing was clear: Cato had left an indelible mark on the Republic. Cato's time as censor was a turning point in his life and in the history of Rome. He had proven that one man, armed with nothing but his principles, could challenge the status quo and inspire change. But his work was far from over. In the years to come, Cato would continue to fight for his vision of Rome, even as the world around him grew more complex and uncertain. His story is a reminder that the pursuit of virtue is never easy, but it is always worth it. Most famous phrases in Roman history: Ceterum censeo Carthaginem esse delendam. Furthermore, I consider that Carthage must be destroyed. This single sentence, repeated relentlessly by Cato, became a rallying cry, a symbol of his unwavering determination, and a testament to his belief that Rome's survival depended on the complete annihilation of its greatest rival. But to understand why Cato was so obsessed with Carthage, we must first understand the deep-seated fear and resentment that defined Rome's relationship with this ancient city. Carthage was no ordinary enemy. For over a century, Rome and Carthage had been locked in a bitter struggle for dominance in the Mediterranean. The First and Second Punic Wars had left deep scars on both sides. Hannibal's invasion of Italy during the Second Punic War had brought Rome to the brink of destruction. Though Rome ultimately emerged victorious, the memory of those dark days lingered. Cato, who had fought in the war, never forgot the threat Carthage posed. Even decades later, as Carthage rebuilt itself and regained some of its former prosperity, Cato saw it not as a defeated foe, but as a sleeping giant that could rise again to challenge Rome. In his later years, Cato became obsessed with the idea that Carthage must be destroyed. He believed that as long as Carthage existed, Rome would never be safe. And so, he made it his mission to convince the Senate and the Roman people of this truth. It didn't matter what the topic of discussion was. Whether it was taxes, public works, or foreign policy, Cato would end every speech with the same words: Ceterum censeo Carthaginem esse delendam. Over time, this phrase became synonymous with Cato himself. It was a reminder of his single-minded focus, his refusal to compromise, and his unshakable belief in Rome's destiny. Cato's persistence paid off. In 149 BC, just a few years before his death, Rome declared war on Carthage once again, the Third Punic War. This time, there would be no half measures. Roman forces laid siege to the city, and after 3 years of brutal fighting, Carthage was utterly destroyed. The city was burned to the ground, its people were enslaved, and its lands were salted to ensure nothing would grow there again. For many Romans, this was a moment of triumph, the final victory over a hated enemy. But for others, it was a tragic example of Cato's stubbornness and his inability to see the world as it was, rather than as he wished it to be. Cato did not live to see the final destruction of Carthage. He died in 149 BC, just as the war was beginning. But his legacy was secure. His famous phrase had become a symbol of Roman determination and ruthlessness. Yet, it also raised difficult questions. Was the destruction of Carthage a necessary act of self-defense, or was it an act of excessive brutality? Did Cato's relentless focus on Carthage blind him to other threats and opportunities? These questions continue to resonate today, as we grapple with the complexities of power, morality, and the cost of victory. Cato the Elder died in 149 BC, at the age of 85, just as the Third Punic War was beginning. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy would endure for centuries. Cato had lived through some of the most tumultuous times in Roman history, from the devastation of the Second Punic War to the rise of Rome as a Mediterranean superpower. Throughout it all, he remained steadfast in his principles, a living embodiment of the virtues he believed were essential to Rome's greatness: discipline, frugality, and moral integrity. In death, as in life, Cato became a symbol, a man who stood firm in his convictions, even as the world around him changed. Cato's influence extended far beyond his lifetime. His writings, particularly De Agricultura, on agriculture, became foundational texts for later generations. In this work, Cato not only provided practical advice on farming, but also articulated a philosophy of life rooted in hard work, self-sufficiency, and simplicity. These ideas resonated deeply with later Roman thinkers, including Cicero, who admired Cato's unwavering commitment to duty and moral integrity. Cicero often cited Cato as a model of Roman virtue, a man who put the good of the Republic above his own interests. The Stoics, too, found inspiration in Cato's life, seeing in him a paragon of self-discipline and resilience in the face of adversity. Yet, Cato's legacy is not without controversy. His rigid conservatism and hostility toward cultural change have been criticized as short-sighted. He saw the world in black and white, with little room for compromise or nuance. His relentless opposition to Greek culture, for example, has been viewed by some as a rejection of progress and intellectual growth. Similarly, his role in the destruction of Carthage has been debated for centuries. Was it a necessary act of self-defense, or an excessive display of Roman ruthlessness? These questions remind us that Cato, like all great figures, was a product of his time, a man shaped by the challenges and conflicts of his era. Despite these controversies, Cato's life remains a powerful reminder of the importance of integrity, discipline, and the courage to stand by one's convictions. In a world that often values power over principle, Cato's story is as relevant today as it was over 2,000 years ago. He challenges us to ask ourselves, what do we stand for? What are we willing to fight for? And what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? Cato the Elder may have lived in a different time, but his story speaks to the timeless struggle between tradition and change, between power and principle. He reminds us that the choices we make, in our personal lives, in our communities, and in our societies, have consequences that ripple through history. As we reflect on Cato's life and legacy, let us ask ourselves, how can we, in our own way, embody the virtues he championed? And how can we ensure that our actions, like his, leave a lasting impact for the better? If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the ancient world. Let us know in the comments, what do you think of Cato's legacy? Was he a hero of Roman virtue, or a man out of step with his time? Until next time, remember, history is not just about the past, it's about the lessons we carry into the future.